I'm supposed to full screen and then switch. There we go. I'm learning. And then I'll hide my little mouse thing up in the corner. So, format-wise, this shouldn't be too much different from my normal React videos, except that you guys are here. So, hey, let's give it a shot. So, we've got King Henry VIII, the oversimplified video. This might be the most requested oversimplified video. I'm not sure. I guess the ones that would be recommended for me, I did pretty early, like the American history ones with like the American Revolution. That's my thing. I would like to go back and check that one out again, actually. I think I'd have more to say now than I did back then. I did the Civil War one. But when we get away from the stuff that when we get away from the stuff that I've studied, this is probably the most requested. As far as King Henry VIII goes, I know his reputation with his wife, or many wives, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. I know the way of remembering the order of them, so I know that part. I know little fun facts about the guy, but I wouldn't consider myself to be super well versed in King Henry VIII. I studied, I had a class on the Middle Ages once, and I know he technically doesn't really fall in the Middle Ages, but we had a conversation about King Henry VIII and a lot of the stuff going on around his time, and it was a big conversation about how we define the Middle Ages, because like there's still a lot of remnants from the Middle Ages that are still around during that time. Coolio is asking, before we get started, I do want to answer this question. Coolio is asking if I could react to the John Adams HBO miniseries. That might be a problem. Because I react to a lot of stuff that's copyrighted, but you kind of figure out over time through trial and error what companies are going to like take down your video for it. I'm scared of television companies. There's another reason why I didn't do the actual filmed Hamilton musical on Disney Plus, instead doing the animatics, because those big film companies, I'm afraid of Disney especially, they'll probably just take the video down. So I would love to talk about the John Adams HBO series, but maybe not in a React video. Maybe I'll find another way to do it. All right, so King Henry VIII, let's get it started. Let me know if you guys are having any audio issues in this. We're gonna do like a quick little run of the beginning of it, and you'll let me know if it sounds good to you. Bird Mom's moderating. She'll let me know if it sounds good. This is a first here, so I might have to adjust some stuff. So let's get it started. Start.
This video was made possible by Honey. Keep watching to find out how you can save money when you shop online. Also, the reviews are in. That's some nice merch. Get your brand new character pin, limited time face mask, and more. Link down below.
Oh, so this was... I didn't even know this was during the pandemic. You shush your face. There's something bothering him? Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm usually able to like cut out his little fits. I'm hoping that for the headphone users, we're going to be okay. Okay, I'll take that from the beginning. I didn't know this was so recent that it was like during the pandemic, so okay.
Mask and more. Link down below. Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Tell me, was I a good king? You were okay. Will I be remembered as the great warrior king who invaded France, revolutionized English healthcare, and developed great parklands? Probably not, because of the wife killings. Sigmund, how did I get here? I still remember the good old days when I was a boy with a heart full of fire.
So it does sound good? That's good. I was very nervous about that because I'd hate to have to fix that live. I am very excited about this, and I'm hoping this can show me a bigger picture of King Henry VIII, because you really do only get that one picture of him if you don't look a little bit deeper. Like, he killed his wives. Actually, the thing I think of him for more is his conflict with the Catholic Church. Like, the wife killings is actually second there, and that's another thing that's not exactly favorable to him. It doesn't exactly look great. The guy just comes in and is like, "Oh, I can't do," and it kind of ties into his wives too, so I guess it counts. He's just like, "Oh, I can't divorce my wife. I'm so narcissistic that, like, clearly I'm right and the Pope is not." This is actually going to be a great opportunity to talk about that, because I've talked about kings and how, like, sometimes I don't believe that they believe in the religion that they claim to believe in, but there's also kind of the argument that being a king during this time kind of inherently makes you so much of a narcissist that you know that you have to be right regardless, even if it's the Pope that's against you. So he might be one of those cases. He might have been a genuine believer that he was just always right.
And Mummy would teach me. Okay, Henry, this is a horse. Can you say horse? Divorce. What? No. Okay, let's try this one. Can you say loaf of bread?
This one's
with
going.
her head. No, Henry, that's wrong. You know what? Last one. Okay. Can you say soap? Soap. Yes, that's it. I'm the supreme head of the church. Screw the Pope! You know what? You're my son and I love you, but you're freaking weird, man.
That was brilliant.
The year is 1491. England has just come out of 3 decades of civil war, in which a bunch of Henrys, Edwards, and one Richard had a little ding-dong over which royal house should rule the realm. Finally, a Henry won, Henry VII, and he had a son. What should we name him? My royal lineage is full of Henrys. A fine name, a vigorous name, a tenacious name, a muscular name. How about Arthur? And so Arthur, Prince of Wales and next in line to the throne, was born. 5 years later, Prince Henry was born, but nobody cares about him. He's not the heir, just a spare. The king wanted to make an alliance with Spain, so one day he said to his son Arthur, "Hey, baby, you see that lady baby? That's gonna be your wife. But father, I'm not even 3 years old yet. Listen, there's something you have to understand. You're my son. But more than that, you're a political bargaining tool. But you love me, right? I love you as a political bargaining tool. Yay. Hey, Pop, who the heck are you?
That's not bad.
I've written you a poem. Listen here, tiny man. Can't you see that I'm busy? But I'm your son.
There's something interesting about how a lot of kings, like, have that preferential treatment for their firstborn, but with how bad the mortality is, you would think that they would invest a little bit more in their backup plan. I don't know. That maybe it wasn't as bad as I'm thinking it is, but I think of so many cases where the firstborn doesn't end up actually being in charge in the long run. And how the backup plan ends up being neglected for a good amount of the build up to that. So it's actually kind of surprising. I don't know.
I have another son? As Arthur was in another palace, being prepped to become king, Henry lived with his mother and 2 sisters at Eltham, where he was being trained for a church career. And not just that, Henry learnt languages, he played sports, he learnt the recorder. What a nerd. Am I right? Wrong. Henry was the coolest kid around. So I told my Latin teacher he could kiss Henry. He has
a Mr. Potato Head. Fun fact, Mr. Potato Head was made in my state. That's the only interesting thing I have to say about that. Actually, we have license plates, even, like novelty license plates with Mr. Potato Head on it. So he's kind of a big deal over here. I find that funny. I don't know if the international audience has Mr. Potato Head or not. I'm sure you do. Maybe you do. I mean, Pixar is huge. There must be some sort of audience for that sort of stuff, with Toy Story being such a big thing, like, internationally. I don't know. Okay, never mind.
He learnt the recorder. What a nerd. Am I right? Wrong. Henry was the coolest kid around. So I told my Latin teacher he could kissius my buddius. Anyway, here's Wonder.
Is my video lagging? Is that just on Coolio's end, or is it mine? I just want to sort this out, just in case.
I can't tell.
You can turn it on for a second to check. Sorry, guys. We're just making sure this is all set. Hey, okay, Duck. Rhode Island is unimportant in a lot of ways, but Mr. Potato Head's just the only relevant fact I have to this conversation. I actually want to do a series on Rhode Island history, and I'm working on it right now, actually, and it's gonna be really cool, and you're gonna like it. Wait till I get to the Door War. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. It was a war about doors.
Wonderwall. Great scholars and theologians from across Europe came to meet and teach the young Prince Henry, who by all accounts was a very enlightened, bright, and charming young boy. Everybody loved Henry, and out of everything Henry was taught, more than anything, he came to adore and respect theology and Catholicism. One of Henry's tutors was English poet laureate John Skelton, who wrote a textbook for Henry that we still have today. In it, he wrote a number of important lessons for the young prince, such as, do not be mean, loathe gluttony, and do not violate widows. Important lessons for any 9-year-old boy. Around this time, Henry's older brother Arthur, now 15 years old, was married to Catherine of Aragon, sealing the union between England and Spain. And then he died.
Oh, great.
Oh, my alliance with Spain, my poor alliance with Spain. And your son, sire? Oh, yes, of course, my son. But mostly my alliance with Spain. Pop, who the heck are you? Oh, yeah! And just like that, an unprepared Prince Henry was now the new heir to the throne. And how about that alliance with Spain? Well, the solution was simple. Hey, boy, see that full-grown woman over there? That's gonna be your wife. What, my brother's widow? Yes.
Oh.
You're a freaking weirdo, man. Now, in the Bible...
I didn't know that. I didn't know she was like, oh, they're gonna go into theology here. Yeah, like, isn't there like something very specifically bad about that? Like no ambiguity about it at all?
Bible. There's a verse that says marrying your brother's widow, that's a big no-no. So the king needed to convince the Pope and get his special permission. Hey, can I please have my son marry his brother's widow? Sure, why not? And so it was. Henry's life was turned on its head as he was moved to the royal court, next in line to the throne. But tragedy struck when just a few months later...
I mean, I guess people can try to find ways of justifying going against the Bible in order to, for like the greater good, because there are a lot of biblical figures, like even some of the bigger ones, like it goes all the way back to Adam, but like even like Moses, who had his own like sins or whatever, but like he's considered pretty darn good because kind of an argument for the greater good. I've seen people historically make those arguments. Okay. This is not a premiere, Austin. I can read the chat. I've just been kind of like checking periodically. Honestly, it's like the smallest little live chat box I have right over here, so it's a little hard to see, so I have to like pull away in order to see it. I wish I had like an iPad size thing or like just a second monitor, but I don't really have anything like that that's convenient and compatible, so I'm just kind of trying to make the best of it. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. Like, I have to apologize before I try to pronounce anyone's screen name. J. Peoples for donating $5 to the Native American Heritage Association. I really appreciate it. Becca, you're Becca. That's way easier. Thank you, Becca. That's really cool. We're trying to get to... I'm not under any illusion that we're going to get to the $10,000 goal that I set at the beginning, but I'm hoping to get to at least $1,500 by the time we finish, which is I really appreciate you contributing to. All right, we shall continue.
Moved to the royal court, next in line to the throne. But tragedy struck when just a few months later, his mother, with whom he was very close, suddenly died in childbirth. The loss of his mother almost certainly had a big effect on the young boy. In his older years, King Henry VII went on a bit of a paranoid trip. As was normal for a king at the time, Henry VII had to quell a number of rebellions, and as he aged, he became ever more suspicious of the nobility around him. To keep them in check, he began levying huge, ruinous fines.
Is there like a joke about like all the like birds and ducks in the background? Because I saw a Psyduck in the background in a previous scene. It's just like all ducks. I don't know if like anybody knows why. Oh, thank you, Austin, for another $5 for the Native American Heritage Association. Really appreciate that. Oh my gosh, you're all so cool. Yeah, so if anybody has an answer for why there are ducks everywhere, I'm sure there's like an inside joke there that I would appreciate more if I knew it better.
Of the nobility around him. To keep them in check, he began levying huge, ruinous fines, left, right, and center. Dukes, bishops, barons, even his own mother. No one was safe from his tyranny, and the nobility of England began to suffer. So when Henry VII finally got sick and died just after Christmas 1508, there was a lot of celebration. Not only because the tyrannical Henry VII was gone, but because his replacement was the ever-popular, charming, and handsome 18-year-old King Henry VIII. Henry married Catherine of Aragon in June.
Yeah, depictions of... I like this design for him. I like that his design changes from here to the end. He could just use the standard picture of Henry VIII and kind of just run through it, and nobody would second guess it, but I like that he has like a changing design for him. I know that by the end, he was not very well, and that was shown at the beginning, because I believe he got injured in a jousting accident. Because he was a Chad, he did stuff like that. He did jousting, and jousting is one of the things we talked about where in my class, where we were like, it's kind of in a lot of ways a remnant of the Middle Ages. It's something you would associate often with the barbarity or whatever of the Middle Ages, but it's still kind of kept alive as like this big tradition, which is really cool. Oh, so there is no lag, just an occasional freeze on the camera. Okay, that's not too bad. Maybe I should turn down the latency next time I try. If it's not like getting in the way too much, then I'll just go with it. Thank you to Crocmaniac for donating 25 something. Polish money. Okay. I'm not sure how much that is, but
$6.32.
That's more than the last two. Thank you. Bird Mom coming in with the conversions, like $6 and what, 32? 22? 32 cents. Thank you very much. That's really cool. It was like a 10-step verification process to send it. Yeah, I mean, you want your money transferred to be safe, right? I would assume. All right.
1509. You may be wondering, if it's so weird to marry your brother's widow, and since he's now king, couldn't Henry just decide not to? Well, yes, he could. But by now, Henry wanted to. The thing about Henry that was unlike many kings of the time was he married for love, and he had grown quite fond of Catherine, very fond. Historians say their marriage was unusually good, and so he was coronated king. And what a king. Compared to his tyrannical father, he was an absolute joy. Having the blood of two royal houses, he was widely supported. He was really, really ridiculously good looking, and those famous calves could achieve world peace. Hey Henry,
what a stud.
Now that you're king, you know what that means. Costume party! Henry pranced around the palace playing dress up with his friends. He wrote plays, he sang songs, he danced. A true Renaissance man, very different from the gluttonous wife killer we think of today. In his early reign, people from near and far would come to ask favors of the generous king. Hey man, could I gain ownership of some land near Upton Snodsbury? Sure thing, pal. Hey, could I be an earl or a baron or a viscount or something? Anything you want, man. Could I get like
he's a people pleaser.
Really
That's not
cool
good.
Pig that has like freaking metal wings and 8 legs and shoots flippin' lasers, and it can grow more pigs out of it for extra pigs. Say no more. Hey guys, I was just checking up on the financial report, and what the hell? We can't afford this. Henry's council that he inherited from his
Like, to a certain degree, if you were coming in as like an unpopular king, I get spending like this. This is just reckless. I mean, it might be a decent investment if you're unpopular and you really want to like sway opinion on you, but they seem like they already liked him. He didn't have to like give them the world.
father weren't happy with all the money he was just throwing around, and they worked hard to curb the king's spending. Since they controlled the royal seals needed to get stuff done, at first they were largely able to control the young king. And for Henry, the most infuriating things of all was they wouldn't let him joust with his friends because it was too dangerous, nor would they let him do the thing he wanted most, to go on a great, glorious, and expensive conquest against England's historic enemy, France. Please guys, I'll keep it cheap. How? I'm glad you asked.
Is that true? Like, okay, Neron Square Evo's brother says that's actually a fact. Poets at the time wrote about his thighs. That's how good they were. That's pretty sick. I mean that's kings get people like, I guess the word is simping that I'm getting in the chat. We're still allowed to say that on YouTube, right? Just not Twitch, right?
You can say it. You're allowed
Twitch doesn't like it.
on Twitch.
Okay, so we're on YouTube, the land of free speech. Yeah, kings normally have people simp over them, but that's oddly specific. And I'm glad that that's a thing. That's way more interesting than not.
Asked. I've got a promo code for the financial burden of war. Yes, Honey is the free browser extension that.
Okay, I'm actually gonna skip the ad here. I've historically watched the ads, but I've been pretty much schooled on how it's pretty much pointless because all of these ads, like if it's more recent, to watch the ad might actually get the promo code out there better, but this is way too old.
That's a lot of moolah. Coupons with one for
So I'm actually gonna skip this.
joinhoney.com/oversimplified. That's joinhoney.com/oversimplified. And you'll also be supporting my channel. So thank you. And war with France.
Oops, my bad. Went a little too far.
Sexy calves, excessive
Sexy
spending,
calves.
and war with France. Henry wanted glory. He wanted to go down in history. If he didn't go to war in France, was he even the King of England? Man, I want to go to war so bad, but the council won't let me. Hey, maybe I can help with that. Whoa, it's Cardinal Woolsey, one of my best friends. Despite being an old-ass man, Cardinal Woolsey knew that if he helped King Henry, there'd likely be something in it for him. So what was his great, intricate plan to curb the council's power? You're the king, dum-dum. You can do whatever you want. What? Wolsey began writing bills that simply didn't require the seals, and thus Henry was back on top. For his efforts, Wolsey began to climb.
Yeah, we're still kind of okay, I can call you Neron. Okay, that's way easier. Yeah, we're still at the point where the king's power is kind of absolute, or they haven't like formally limited the monarchy. I guess there's kind of, I guess it protects your integrity to give a little bit of power to things like parliament and whatever. Like that makes total sense, and that's a good way to not get overthrown, because a king is always going to be worried about that. His father was too. So, but you can reach a little bit if you really want to. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but you can afford to reach a little bit.
Climbed the ranks, and he became something of a yes man for King Henry, encouraging Henry to frolic and play while Wolsey took care of business. Hey, kid, you want to go on an adventure? Do I ever? The Pope was at war with France and he needed some help. He offered the young, impressionable King Henry 100 Parmesan cheeses, some wine, and a golden rose if he came to the Pope's aid, and Henry was all in.
That's a lot of cheese.
At this point in his life, he still respected the church and loved the Pope, and here was the chance for war he had been waiting for. He still didn't have an heir, a fairly big problem for a monarch at the time, but right now, the only kind of smashing he was interested in was smashing French guys in the face. And so off he went. The English already held the French city of Calais. From there, Henry made a glorious victory at the Battle of the Spurs. He took the French cities of Terouanne and Tournai. Word of his victories spread. This was it. Here was the glory he had been waiting for. Back home, his beautiful...
Oh, there's a little red dot here at the bottom. Like, what is that? Does anybody know what this little thing at the bottom of France is? Because if it's not France, what is it? I'm trying to think of what's over there. I was just playing GeoGuessr in France before. Monaco? Is that Monaco? No, that's a little too high to be Monaco. I don't know what that is. Anyone got that? Papal city of Avignon. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I just like to know little details. This is so much better because I can actually ask you guys to answer questions, and there's always somebody who can answer it. This is great. We got to keep doing it this way. I'm gonna learn more.
Spread. This was it. Here was the glory he had been waiting for. Back home, his beautiful wife also led armies to victory in Scotland, and better yet, she was pregnant. Soon, Henry would have an heir. All of Henry's wildest dreams were coming true. Oh, he ran out of money. As the French prepared to invade Italy, all Henry could do was go home. Well, at least now I have an heir to cheer me up. Bring me my son. Henry, this is Mary. Mary? That's a funny name for a boy. Henry, it's a girl.
Oh.
This was Catherine's fifth pregnancy that had not resulted in a male heir. Happy Henry wasn't so happy anymore. You still haven't given me a male heir. Well, how do you know it's my problem? Maybe it's your problem, Henry. It couldn't be my problem because I've been boinking half your maid staff and one of them gave me a boy.
Scientifically, it is specifically something to do with the male, right? That causes them to get a male heir. It's already like going to be a male from what's going on in the dude before it gets into the woman. So it's definitely not her fault. I think that's like the first thing that anybody points out when learning about Henry VIII, that it actually is not his wife's fault. Biologically, it's his fault. Even though it's not really anybody's fault because you can't really control it. But if you were to blame somebody's biology, it would be his. Oof.
Sure. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's my problem. I'll look into that. Cardinal Woolsey, now Henry's Lord Chancellor, knew his job depended on keeping Henry happy, and so he said, well, if you can't be the great warrior, then how about the great peacemaker? Not as cool, but okay. And so the Field of the Cloth of Gold, a glamorous peace summit between England and France, was held. The King of France, Francis I, was essentially the French version of King Henry, and the whole thing was basically one giant codpiece measuring contest. The two sides did agree to a peace treaty. However, it didn't last long. You see, there was a third major player in European politics at the time, an exquisite specimen of royal inbreeding, an heir to a huge inheritance, and a chin that could hit Holy Roman Emperor Charles V.
Yeah, it is.
He was Henry's wife's nephew. Henry had helped him out in the past to put down a Spanish rebellion, and now the two wanted to make an alliance, and so a marriage was arranged. Mary, I'd like to introduce you to your 22-year-old fully grown adult cousin, and now your future husband. Ew, he looks inbred. Mary! We're all inbred with their new.
And yeah, somebody pointed out in the chat that is the Bloody Mary, which I've learned a little bit more about recently. I knew about like the basic story of her, like burning Protestants and stuff like that, but I was able to encounter her a little bit more recently on a paper I was writing about Quakers, actually, who fled to the would-be United States, and how kind of the long-term impact of what they of her oppression of different Protestant groups caused a lot of people to flee to the New World, or at least caused the feelings that would kind of snowball into people leaving for the New World. But she's not alone in that, of course. There's a lot of people who were responsible for that problem. It goes for generations.
New alliance, Charles and Henry agreed to team up and relaunch a campaign against France. In 1522, the English landed and stormed as far south as Agincourt, but Charles didn't commit significant forces. Whoops, sorry man, not sure what happened. I'll join in next year. The next year, England swept northern France, almost taking Paris. But once again, where was Charles? Oh man, I'm so sorry. I promise, next year, I'll be there. The next year came, and a fed-up Henry decided he was gonna sit this one out. And just as Charles ravaged the French at the Battle of Pavia and captured the French king. Holy crap, dude. Yeah, I totally kicked France's butt. That's great. So, can I have the French throne like we agreed? No. What? And also, I don't want to marry your ugly daughter anymore. Ugly?
Ooh.
Have you seen your chin? Mummy says it's a strong chin for a strong boy. As Henry's alliance with Charles fell apart, Henry
He's
knew
lovely.
his days as a warrior were over. This was a problem for Henry, but it was a bigger problem for his wife. Catherine of Aragon had two jobs. The first was to give Henry a male heir, but the second was to maintain an alliance with her relatives in Spain, including her nephew. She had failed, and Henry's sexy eyes began to wander. Home from all his wars, Henry ate up his daily 5,000 calories of meat as an
This is the,
Home from all his wars, Henry ate up his daily 5,000...
Yeah, that's the King Henry VIII we know. Like, from the very famous painting. I don't see a whole lot of depictions of him when he was younger. This is it. And he's still, although he's getting a little bit bigger, he still, kind of appears to be pretty strong. Of course, the painting could be a bit favorable, but, like, he isn't quite where he is at the end yet. But here we got it.
1,000 calories of meat
this
as
is
an
what I'm
infatuation
used to.
began to grow for one of his wife's ladies in waiting, Anne Boleyn. Beautiful, intelligent, cultured. She was exactly Henry's type. Now, Henry had had dozens of mistresses, including Anne's sister, but Anne didn't want to just be Henry's side chick. She wanted to be his queen. Henry sent dozens of letters, thirsty love poems. In one, he proclaimed that he would like to kiss her pretty duckies. Henry's loins were on fire, but Anne kept him at just the right distance to drive him crazy and push.
Oh, that's the duck thing. The duck joke. Okay, because all the duck paintings on the wall. I needed an explanation for that. That must be what it's referencing there. That was foreshadowing.
To find a way to get rid of his current wife. Wolsey, I want a divorce. And as the representative of the Pope here in England, I expect you to sort it out quickly and quietly. I don't want this to turn into a Europe-wide scandal. You got it, Your Majesty.
Hey, Big Papa! My boy Henry says he wants to divorce his wife. Any chance?
To Henry's shock and horror, Wolsey deferred the case back to the Pope in Rome. To make matters worse, after all the wars in Europe, the Pope was currently under the thumb of Charles V. Now everybody knew what was going on, and Henry's divorce trial had become a pawn of greater European politics. For Wolsey, the decision was a disaster. His job was to keep Henry happy, and Henry was very, very unhappy. Nevertheless, the divorce trial began. Henry's case rested upon the Bible verse in Leviticus that claimed marrying your brother's widow would lead to childlessness, and Henry was certainly having a hard time getting a male heir. He argued that the
I compare knowing the Bible to knowing the law. If you know it well enough, you can find something, and maybe it'll take a little bit of a stretch, but you can find something that can justify what you want to do, because there is so much material. Like, if you are really well versed in, like, the law, especially in, like, common law systems and stuff like that, you can find something to justify what you already want to do. I'm not saying it's proper by any means, but like, if he's got people, like, scanning through the Bible trying to find a justification, he can. His was actually not too far from from the argument that I would make if I were like his lawyer in this divorce trial or something like that. That is probably the argument I would make. I would make the argument that the Pope was wrong. But also I would make the argument, if I was on the other side, that the Pope made this exception, therefore you can't pull back because of that. He already said it was okay this once.
Pope had got it wrong when he allowed Henry to marry his brother's widow, and that now divorce was the only solution. However, the Pope and Charles V acquired some interesting letters from an unknown source. He wants to kiss her pretty duckies? Man, this guy's loins are on fire. The Pope now knew the case for divorce may not actually be found in Henry's Bible, but in Henry's pants. After escaping Charles V, the Pope did send out one Cardinal Campeggio to oversee the trial. Campeggio was an old man racked with gout. It took him 6 painful months to travel from Rome to England, and when he finally got there, this kept happening. Hey, I need you to take a look at this evidence. I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, are you ready to take my testimony? I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, can you please make a decision? I can't. Your gout is acting up. My gout is acting up. Anne Boleyn, with her Protestant views in support of the Reformation, suspected the Pope was just delaying. For 2 whole years, the trial dragged on, and in the end, the Pope simply said, no divorce for you. Henry, the king that had previously defended the Pope militarily from France and intellectually from the reformist ideas of Martin Luther, who had once respected the Pope above all, now found the Pope standing between him and fourth base. Your Majesty, what will you do? I'm the king, dum-dum. I can do whatever I want. What? For his failure, Henry removed Wolsey from the court, a decision that was likely influenced by Anne Boleyn, who disliked the cardinal. Having fallen from grace and with potential charges of treason over his head, Wolsey died of illness a year later. Then, Henry set about removing England from the influence of the Pope. Hey, if you do that, I'll excommunicate you. Who cares, man? Oh no. Apathy, my weakness. Henry gathered theologians and scholars together to help him make his case against the Pope. Together, they argued to the people of England that the Pope's rule over the church was basically a takeover of what had once been a self-governing, national English church. And if that sounds familiar, some historians do believe this moment may have laid the foundations for English Euroscepticism. That's right, Brexit may have been influenced by Henry's explosive loins. By and large, the people gave Henry their support, and those that didn't were going to be in for a rough time.
That's an interesting
but for
argument.
Now, Henry assumed the role of supreme head of the English church, and his next divorce trial was a foregone conclusion. Catherine of Aragon was Aragon, and Anne Boleyn was in. Alright, I've upended the entire country to be with you, so you'd better give me a son, okay? Now, did you get my letter about the duckies? Having finally married the girl of his dreams, it was party time for Henry. And what a party. Life in the Tudor court was non-stop. Huge banquets, with each person eating on average 5,000 calories a day. And no vegetables. Those are for poor people. Rich people ate meat. And so you know what else is for rich people? Constipation. But don't let that stop the party.
Oh, yeah.
The toilets are communal. And Henry himself was the center of everything. He ate the best food. He had 1,200 pairs of shoes. He didn't even have to wipe his own bum-bum. Life was great. Everyone, I give you your majesty, King Henry VIII. But how did they pay for it all? Well, influenced by his fairly Protestant...
Well, Neron, he's asking, since he doesn't know much about baseball, what is fourth base? Fourth base is where you go when you, score. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you score a point. So, like, yeah. There's the metaphor. It's an unfortunate one.
Protestant new wife. Since Henry had overturned the organization of the church, this is how they paid for it. Oh my goodness, how awful. Selling fake fragments of the cross? Vials of Jesus' blood that you got from a duck? Using religion in this way? This is terrible. I must confiscate all this money at once. Yes, how awful. I must take all of this away immediately. Monasteries across the nation were dissolved and their riches placed in the royal coffers. Obviously, many people weren't too happy about this, but Henry had a plan for that as well. Henry's descent into tyranny had begun, as any who rejected his new claim as supreme head of the English church found their heads on the chopping block. And so Henry partied. He danced, he sang, he ate, he jousted.
Oh, there we go.
Be me. Love gluttony. Violate widow!
Yeah, I've heard the argument that he went a little nuts here. Whether or not it was actually done by the jousting accident, that must have been like physically super traumatic. It definitely contributed to a change in his lifestyle because he couldn't be nearly as athletic anymore. He couldn't exercise, and those calories are going to add up if you can't exercise.
In 1536, Henry fell from his horse in a jousting accident. Not for the first time, but certainly the heaviest fall he had taken yet. Some historians believe the brain damage caused by the incident may have violently accelerated Henry's descent into tyranny. Executions in England ramped up. During his reign, it's estimated 57 to 72,000 people were put to death. Rich or poor, big or small, no one was safe. And the most prominent victim of all was to be Henry's own.
I'd just like to acknowledge we've passed 50 people watching live, and I'm so happy about that. Yesterday when we did GeoGuessr, we were at about 10. I didn't even announce it, and I was happy with that. But I'm super happy to have you all here. His infection and brain damage he got caused the problems. Yeah, that seems about right, Neron. It's definitely extremely traumatic, so I'd believe it.
wife. It had been 3 years since their marriage. Anne had been pregnant 4 times, yet she had only been able to produce one healthy child, a girl. What's more, it's possible she had been going around insulting Henry's manhood. Henry's eyes, once again, began to wander. His new top man, Thomas Cromwell, didn't want to end up like Cardinal
Cromwell, I
Woolsey,
know him.
and so he came up with a plan. There was a court musician who had been quite flirtatious in public with the Queen. Well, Thomas Cromwell and his boys got a forced confession out of him, saying that it didn't stop at innocent flirtation, and the charges came rolling in. Listen, Anne, we need to talk. Oh no, you're gonna divorce me, aren't you? Just like your last wife. Aw, no, come here, shh, no, I'm not gonna divorce you. It's much worse than that. Anne was charged with adultery, perversion, even incest, and plotting to kill the king himself. The jury found her guilty, including her own uncle and ex-fiancé, both fearing the wrath of the king. And on May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn was Anne Boleyn. Literally the next day, Henry married one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, his 3rd wife. After Anne had smack-talked his manhood, and since he still had no male heir, Henry went on a campaign to ensure the public knew he was as virile as it gets. He had this famous portrait painted of the manliest man I've ever seen, and later,
yeah, so
as it gets, he had this.
I would think that this is a very favorable image to him, but this is definitely the one you think of. How did she get charged for incest? That was kind of the thing back then. I don't fully understand how incestuous it has to get for it to be bad. During that time, the standards are okay. Rachel's saying cousins yes, but siblings no. Okay, that would, I guess that would make sense back then. If I'm trying to put myself in their head.
Famous portrait painted of the manliest man I've ever seen, and later he would even have his physician make a declaration about his health. King Henry is a fine specimen of a man, and please don't make me say this. Say it. And every time I look at him, I wish I was a woman. The truth is, after his jousting accident, the king had badly injured his leg and was no longer very active, yet he was still eating his daily 5,000 calories. So by now, Henry was extremely unhealthy. For the remainder of his life, he would incur a number of illnesses, and his injured leg ulcers would ooze stinking pus. A fine specimen of a man indeed. On the church front, Henry's new and now pregnant wife was a devout Catholic, and she pleaded with the king to reinstate the monasteries. Henry was sick of wives meddling in his business, and he bluntly warned her to remember what happened to Anne Boleyn. Since splitting with the Pope, Henry had been hard at work determining the theology of his new Church of England. It kept many Catholic traditions, while on the other hand embracing some reformist ideas, such as requiring the use of a new Bible not in Latin, but in English. The cover of Henry's new Bible depicted the people appearing to worship a giant King Henry. And
that is actually a generally good thing, I would assume. Or at least it kind of further democratizes religion, or at least lays the foundation to democratize it and allow people to read and interpret what they're worshiping on their own, which I think that's a generally good thing that ordinary people would be able to understand. I understand literacy is not incredibly high, but this definitely increases the amount of people that could read it immensely.
And in the corner, there's some people being put to death, just for good measure. For any who opposed Henry's ideas, whether Catholic or Protestant, for any who rebelled against him, it would be off with their heads. In October 1537, Henry finally got what he had been waiting for. His wife Jane gave birth to a healthy boy. However, the triumph soon turned to tragedy, as Jane Seymour died days later from complications during the birth. Henry mourned Jane, the woman who had given him a son, for 2 years. Your Majesty, it's time to choose your next wife.
Thomas! Not now! Can't you see I'm in mourning?
That one. The woman Thomas Cromwell had lined up for Henry's next
Anne of
marriage
Cleves.
was the sister of a powerful German duke. But all Henry cared about was that she was pretty as pie, and Thomas Cromwell promised that indeed she was. However, when she arrived in England, Henry was less than pleased. Your Majesty, let me introduce you to your 4th wife, Anne of Cleves. What's that smell? I think it's your legs, sire. No, it's Anne of Cleves. She's ugly. This is treason. What? Off with his head. Henry found his new wife so repulsive that he never consummated the marriage and divorced her just 6 months later.
Really?
And for bringing Henry an ugly, stinky woman, along with additional charges of plotting treason, Thomas Cromwell lost his head. The very same day of Cromwell's execution, Henry married his 5th wife, the famed beauty Catherine Howard. She's believed to have only been 17 at the time.
Jeffrey is saying that the church was against the translation because there was potential for mistranslation. I could see why that would be a problem. But there is certainly throughout the church's history kind of an exclusivity. Like, there had to be room for the more upper class, well-read folks to interpret and explain to you what the Bible really means. There has been a big history of that as well. So I'm sure there's kind of layers to the problems to it. But yeah, I could see there being big problems with mistranslation. I'm sure they don't want people just going out and interpreting it either, because that might be that could be problematic in itself. They could get people out there not really listening to their interpretation either. So there's some problems that could go on there. I kind of like the idea of people having the opportunity to interpret it on their own, but I understand why they would be concerned about it.
Henry was 49, and like Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard didn't last long. You see, for some reason, she may not have been entirely satisfied with her 49-year-old fine specimen of a man, and it's possible she engaged in a number of extramarital affairs, including one with her cousin, Thomas Culpeper. When Henry found out, he was devastated. How could she do this to me? But, sire, don't you have hundreds of mistresses?
Shut up, Barry. That's not the point.
Your Majesty, you're crying. I'm not crying. It's just that sometimes, when I get sad, water comes out of my eyes. For her treason, Catherine Howard...
That is kind of a trait of a narcissist. Being able to cheat on another person, but not being able to handle being cheated on. I think there's a pretty good argument that he was. I don't think anybody would really argue against him being a bit of a narcissist, especially at this stage in his life.
Howard met the same fate as Anne Boleyn in 1542. So, we've had divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, look out, here comes survived. Henry married the daughter of a royal official, Catherine Parr, in 1543, and she appears to have been a good companion to Henry. She cared for the aging king, who by now was so heavy it took several men to winch him onto his horse. She acted as a mediator within the family, and convinced the king to restore his 2 daughters to the line of succession. Their marriage did have one hiccup, however, when Catherine dared disagree with the king over the subject of theology. It's a miracle, because when the priest says the words of institution, the bread turns into the body of Christ. Well, if you put the bread in a box for 3 months, is it a miracle that it turns moldy? Treason! You can't just call everything treason, Henry. The king called for her arrest, as serious charges were placed over her head. However, in the end, she told Henry that she had not been disagreeing with him, but simply learning from him. And so when the guards came to arrest her, the king told them to make like an Anne and cleave. Catherine Parr stayed with Henry right until the end.
That's clever.
As he aged into his later years, in increasing pain and ill health, he grew ever more suspicious and moody. The once generous, promising young king was now feared by all around him.
Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Hold me.
Of course, sire. Do you have any final wishes? How about one last conquest in France? And so in 1544, Henry made for...
Yes, Dream Master, live streams are going to be a thing on the channel from now on. Probably every Sunday. For those of you who came in after, I'm going to try to make this like a Sunday tradition because I'm going to be a little less active during the week. I know a lot of you came in after the introduction, so it's important to point that out a few times during this. So yeah, I'm going to try to hopefully closer to noon on every Sunday. We'll see how that ends up going, but I think it'll be fun because I'm going to be able to get a lot done in a short period of time and give myself a little bit more time to do my studies throughout the week and work on my bigger projects, and you'll see how those manifest.
For Calais. The pesky French had been supporting the Scottish in their ongoing wars with England, and they also owed Henry some money. So the extremely unhealthy king personally led a siege against the French city of Boulogne.
I'm so used to Scotland being I'm so used to the union between the two. I guess I get so stuck in the period that I study, and I see them separate. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. I do that all the time. I had this one point where I was looking at a modern map, and I saw that the first time I noticed, like, on a map, like, noticeable differences between Ireland and the rest of the UK, and I was like, that doesn't feel right, but I know it is. I have those moments all the time because I get so stuck in the 19th century. I get so stuck in the British Empire.
Some money. So the extremely unhealthy king personally led a siege against the French city of Boulogne. The English dug tunnels under the castle, and on the 13th of September, the French surrendered. A glorious victory for Henry. In actuality, the whole misadventure nearly bankrupted England, and they ended up giving Boulogne back to the French a few years later. But shh, don't tell Henry. He's having his moment. Finally, in 1547, a 55-year-old Henry, lapsing in and out of consciousness, passed away. His son, Edward, succeeded him, but died just 5 years later. His daughter, Mary, briefly took the reins and steered the country back towards
Mary.
the Pope. But then his second daughter embraced reformist ideas and gradually transformed England
She's
into
well
a
liked.
Protestant country. Henry's desperation to marry Anne Boleyn and his resulting feud with the Pope had changed the course of English history and religion forever. Unfortunately, none of Henry's children had heirs, and when Elizabeth I died, Henry's lineage ended, with the House of Stuart replacing the House of Tudor. So then you might think, all that effort, a life filled with so much frustration, yet he never conquered France, he barely had a male heir, and his lineage died out. The egotistical man Henry grew sick and cruel, and then died. So why are we all so fascinated with King Henry VIII? Why not Henry II or IV? Well, without mentioning the many important things his reign did achieve, one of his biggest goals was to go down in history, and you can put a big green check beside that one. Because everything he did and how he asserted his control and authority over everyone around him has come to be viewed as the epitome of the word king. And also because of the wife killings.
Indeed.
Yeah, definitely the wife killings.
Definitely the wife king. Dude, that was really sick. So now I only have like a handful of these left to do. King Henry VIII is really a fascinating figure. I understand why people really like him. Hold on, gotta pull up my face. I've got